Can you hear us?
Yes.
It's loud.
Oh, okay.
Assalamualaikum, ya Khalif. How are you?
Waalaikumsalam. How are you, Datuk?
Yeah, fine, alhamdulillah. What are we doing here? So?
Okay, can we start?
Yeah, it's up to you.
Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Thank you for attending this discourse this afternoon. We thank our guest speaker, Datuk Syed Tawfik al-Attas, for this opportunity to share his knowledge with us. This February will be the 10th anniversary of cases, RZ cases. 21st February 2011, it was established in UTM Kuala Lumpur. And now we are about to celebrate the 10th anniversary. So this is the first program in a series of many other programs. We invited our honored friend, Datuk Syed al-Attas. So there will be many other programs following in the next future. This 10 years for cases is very challenging. It is a challenging journey, but satisfying. We are fortunate and thankful for the support of Her Majesty, the Queen of Johor, Tuanku Raja Zari Sofia, and also the Chancellor of UTM. We are also fortunate for the support of all of you who attend here and in many of our programs, Saturday lecture series, our brothers and sisters and the students who are very intelligent and active and immersed in our activities. And we learn so much from our great teacher, Syed Muhammad Naqib al-Attas, and we strive to inculcate in our intellectual and everyday life. It is challenging for us because we don't follow the current trends in tertiary education. It is easy to follow the trends, to correct and to set a new culture is very challenging. So we need your support, all of you, your contribution, and please keep supporting our program. So today we are fortunate and it is my great honor to present to you our guest speaker, Datuk Syed Tawfik al-Attas. Datuk Syed Tawfik al-Attas was the third Director General of Institute Kefahaman Islam Malaysia, IKIM. He graduated and earned his PhD from ISTAC. He was my senior at ISTAC. I was very junior when he about to finish his PhD. And he wrote many books, A Guide to Philosophy, 2009, and also the Masyai Philosophical System, 2010. He will deliver a topic which is very important, the importance of humanities, the humanities in a STEM world, in a STEM-driven world. This topic is timely and crucial in understanding our predicaments in education today, and many has raised concern about the dehumanized education, which produce dehumanized men, and also corrupt leaders and unethical leaders. So our guest speaker today will enlighten us to the question on what is the nature of our problems and what can we do to cope with this problem. Syed Tawfik al-Attas.
Yeah,
The floor is yours.
thank you very much. Well, let's start by first I have to thank, of course, the Raja Zarif Sofia Cassis UTM platform, of course yourself as well, Khalif, and the participants who are registered for this dialogue. It's a pity actually now, because I would love to be there at Cassis with all the participants. It's much more cordial and convivial if we have all of us together, but unfortunately in this time we can't do this. But maybe in the future, inshallah, we can have a better interaction. I honestly don't like the multimedia format. Sometimes you get interruptions, sometimes there are problems with the connection, etc. And I can't see the participants. That's another problem. I'd like to see them so you can at least interact on a personal basis. Anyway, such is life, and this is the way we are now forced to conduct ourselves. But first of all, thank you very much as well, as I said just now, for the invitation and for the kind invite, and also for the subject matter involved, this humanities in a STEM-driven world. I think it's very important, first of all, to maybe put some parameters over what we mean by humanities, what we mean by STEM. So to begin with, let's do that. Let's just try to outline the parameters of what we mean by the humanities. Now, these humanities, what we mean is the academic disciplines which are related to aspects of human society, culture, history, language, literature, philosophy, geography, art, law, ethics, justice, politics, religion, archaeology, and so on and so forth. I mean, we've just mentioned a few here. Some of those have more emphasis and more bearing on human life, on humanity, rather than other subjects, for instance, politics, and we will get to that in a minute. Then we also have to say that in general, the branches of knowledge that concern themselves with human beings is what we call humanities. Sometimes using analytical or critical methods of inquiry derived from what the Western world will say human values. Of course, the Muslims, we will not admit to this kind of definition. We will say that it's more connected with virtue. Anyway, these humanities are concerned with the ideas, words, that allows one to comprehend and make sense of our lives and our world, of our existence, and to develop our consciousness as to what is important, what has priority, and what does not have priority. The humanities, therefore, preserve the great accomplishments of the past and allow us to learn from them, not only of the past, but it helps us to imagine and to allow us to chart the future. This is basically, in a nutshell, what we mean by humanities. Now, on the other hand, when we say STEM, what do we mean by STEM? This obviously is the acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Of course, before, I think it was something else. I think it was like science, mathematics, engineering, and technology, or something like that. But the acronym was more or less the same. Now, as far as STEM is concerned, these STEM subjects are concerned, these are more concerned with playing a key role in sustaining economic growth and assumes a future controlling stake in the global economy. That's what the STEM is more or less geared towards. It is only concerned with the physical sciences and assumes that it continues to rise to critical thinking and innovation. That is again arguable because, as we said, when in the STEM subjects, we are only concerned with the physical sciences, and it assumes that these physical sciences therefore can give rise to critical thinking and innovation. But what it lacks is imagination. And I think this is a very important part that we need to emphasize. So if we were to ask ourselves, what is the biggest issues or one of the big issues that you see when it comes to both STEM and the humanities? Now, when I answer this, I'm referring specifically to Malaysia. Of course, this can be extrapolated to the wider Muslim world, perhaps. But in general, we can say that the biggest issue I see with both the STEM and the humanities subjects is that there is a lack of a clear curriculum for what students should be learning. And there is also a lack of qualified teaching staff because there is no guideline or there is no reference as to how qualified or what the qualification of the teachers are and how they have to be. Another thing that we can say is with the STEM subjects is because people have different levels of aptitude, if you are lacking in any kind of STEM subjects, the assumption is that these students who are lacking will be left behind. And I think that's a big problem because, especially in Malaysia, if we have students who are falling behind in these STEM subjects, the probability of them being left behind in the future is very high. And this is quite disappointing when you think about it. Now, let's say we go back to what we said about the humanities just now. In particular, we emphasize the part about politics. Now, why must I emphasize politics? After all, I'm not really somebody who is who enjoys politics. But let me just say this to make it clear so that you can understand now why politics is important, especially when we talk about democracy. Now, in this country, we are talking about a parliamentary democracy. Well, let's examine this and see whether it actually has any kind of bearing on what we're saying. So now we tend to think very highly of democracy. And because this democracy originates from the Greek worldview, actually, we think very highly of it and we think democracy works. And the Western countries who borrowed this idea of democracy from the Greeks and who applied it themselves, who are now trying to guide the Muslim world towards this democracy that they understand, we have to at least give Greek philosophy a certain look to see to what extent does this democracy play. Now, Greek philosophy was very skeptical when it came to democracy. Now, in particular, we can say, or we can cite Socrates, the father of the teacher of Plato. He was very skeptical of democracy. If we look at the dialogues of Plato, we will discover that Socrates is portrayed as being very pessimistic on democracy. In I think it's book 6 of Plato's Republic, Socrates asked this question: if you were going on a journey by sea, this is what Socrates says, who would you want to be in charge of the ship? Would you put just anyone to be in charge of the ship? Any Tom, Dick, or Harry? Or would you put someone educated in the ways of seafaring, in the ways of navigation, and etc., in the ways of geography? Clearly, you'll have to say that the latter is what you would choose. In other words, the one who was qualified in terms of seafaring, in terms of navigation, in terms of geography, etc. This is the one you would ask to become the captain of the ship. So why would you think that just anybody would be fit to judge who would lead a country? That's a very interesting question, isn't it? You are not saying that voting in an election is not a skill. It has to be a skill. What Socrates therefore says is that voting is a skill that has to be learned, isn't it? Now, because of that, it is not simply a random feeling. In other words, you don't vote, generally speaking, based on feeling. I mean, of course, nowadays that's how it is. I'm saying that democracy proper is a skill, not a feeling. Now, by virtue of the fact that it is a skill, it needs to be taught. Where should we teach this idea of how to vote democratically in the right manner, how to pick the most suitable candidate, one who knows about the subject matter, one who knows about humanity, one who knows about justice, one who knows about ethics? Where would we find such a person? Obviously, we have to teach these subjects in the university, not in the primary school or the secondary school. These children are below the voting age, so why teach them in the primary schools or the secondary schools? Now, putting responsibility into the hands of those who are not considered of having a particular kind of responsibility, or putting it in the hands of those who are not conscious of such a responsibility, or who are uneducated concerning that responsibility that they are given, it is like allowing that uneducated, unskilled, to take the helm of the ship in a storm. Contrary to being responsible, therefore, this would be an irresponsible act. In other words, to give someone the responsibility of a vote without that person having the skill of voting is an irresponsible act and an unjust act. Now, Socrates himself experienced the injustice of irresponsibility, because if we remember from the story, in 399 BC, Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens, and he was brought to court. And in the courtroom, they brought in something like 500 Athenians, just off the street, 500 Athenians to be the jury, to come and adjudicate whether Socrates was in fact corrupting the youth of Athens or not. And in the end, what happened? The poor, unfortunate Socrates, he was adjudicated to have corrupted the youth of Athens, and therefore he was guilty and sentenced to death by drinking hemlock. What a horrible way to go. It was a narrow majority, actually, that convicted him, but still a majority nonetheless. But that was what they called democracy in those days. But these people didn't have the skill to adjudicate. They didn't have the skill to have discernment, none of that. It was just based on their own whims and fancies and feelings. Only those who have been given serious, rational thought to issues should be allowed to vote. What we have today is a democracy that is called a democracy by birthright, not a democracy of conscious, responsible, intellectual capacity. Now, that's a big problem. If we consider democracy simply as a birthright and not as a conscious, responsible, and intellectual thing. This is why the humanities are important, because in order to be able to have a government that will emphasize the importance of certain things that relate to us, we need to have a proper leadership, not one that is going to result in demagoguery, which is actually what we have today. And this is what the Greeks were very afraid of, in particular Socrates and Plato. They were afraid of the fact that because democracy was understood as just anyone has the right to vote, that what you will see in future is a demagoguery. And this is actually what we have today. demagoguery. Now, there's another good example how Socrates gives us the example of demagoguery. I have to check the book here. Well, I mean, we can first we can say that we have much experience with demagoguery in Malaysia, unfortunately. The wealthy, smooth-talking individuals whose tongues are sharper and keener than their intellect. These are people who are seeking election routinely, and they routinely seek to exploit human desire for every solution. Now, Socrates, let me see what his example was. Socrates, for example, asked to imagine a debate between two candidates, one who was like a doctor, the other one who was like a sweet shop owner. And Socrates said, just imagine, the sweet shop owner would say, look, here is a man who hurts you, gives you bitter potions, tells you what to eat, what not to eat, tells you to stay away from this and that. All kinds of things are a problem, apparently. He'll never serve you a feast of many delicacies like me, said the sweet shop owner. Now then Socrates asked us to consider, how would this doctor answer? How would the other candidate, who was like akin to a doctor, how would he answer this? If he were to answer it truthfully, he would say, I give you discomfort and advise you against your desires in order just to help you. Now, this would make him lose the election because people don't want to hear that. People want to have simple solutions. And so they think in simple minds and simple terms as well. So even though the doctor is giving good advice, nobody wants to listen because it doesn't fulfill their desire. The sweet shop owner, on the other hand, does. And this, unfortunately, is what we have today. The ones who are skilled with their witty stories, with their tongues, sharp tongue, sharp this, sharp that. The way they speak is very clever, but the intellect lacks. They don't have a clear vision. They don't have a clear direction. And therefore, the ones who suffer are the people who are the ones who put them in the position of power in their first place. But who is to blame? It's because we are our responsibility consciously. We just do. Democracy, you can say, is only as effective as the education system surrounding it. That's why we are saying, or we have said in the past, that because our education system is so rotten, it's so broken, we need to have a complete systemic shift. Why systemic? Because the system itself is broken. Not just the system of education, but the system that made the system of education what it is today. And that would be the leadership system. And that means that we have to start thinking about that as well. The system of ours in this country, are we satisfied with the way things are? Or do we want actually to have discerning change where we can see a change for the better? Not simply a demagogue who stands in front of the population and speaks all kinds of nice words and tells you all kinds of solutions and candy they're going to give you. These are the what do you call it? These are the speech of the ignorant in reality. Look at what the Quran says. The Quran says, "Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addul amanat ila ahliha." Again, the ahli isn't simply understood to be a member of that, or a person who is involved in that, like what the Malaysians here sometimes use this Quranic verse in the Friday sermon to corrupt the idea from the Quran and say that it refers to the laborer, the pekerja, or the civil service, that the ahli mean the civil service. That's not what it means. It means for those who are duly and properly qualified, who have the capacity and who have accepted the responsibility to be the ones who have command. This is actually something that we are lacking completely, and it's because of our education system. Now today we have this STEM-driven education system where everything revolves around science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as if that all the world problems can be solved by emphasizing STEM subjects, while at the same time we put the humanities on the back burner, and we claim that the sciences, these STEM subjects are the ones that will lead to innovation and creativity. That's not altogether true, because the humanities also give rise to creativity and innovation, if not more. If we look back at our civilization, our history, that's another thing we have to study in school properly. We have to study history properly. We have to study language properly. We have to study philosophy properly. We have to study physics properly. These are all things we need to do on a proper basis, not you know, ad hoc, not as the convenience allows. But today, when we emphasize STEM subjects, we are emphasizing them precisely because we want economic growth. And that is all what the government is concerned about, economic growth. And this economic growth, the job market is much more geared towards holders of STEM subject degrees. And therefore, they encourage that more and more, because that will give you a better job. But what does it do for humanity at large? The big issues that plague the world are always going to be the same if we don't address them. What are the big issues? We can name one of them: poverty. Poverty is a big world issue. And we always seem to be talking, or at least the government seems to be talking about the fact that we need to eradicate poverty. You are never going to eradicate poverty. This is part of the human condition. What you can do, however, is you can control it, you can manage it. And the Muslim governmental system already has the mechanisms in place to do that. So does the Western world have mechanisms in place to deal with it. But the problem is we are putting the unqualified people in the place of authority, and therefore the management and distribution of these resources are misplaced. If we look again from the tradition of Muslim intellectuals of the past, look at al-Ghazali, for instance. Al-Ghazali asked this question when talking about justice. He said, would you give the keys to the treasury to the imam of the mosque? Would you give command of the military to the school teacher? I mean, these questions he's asking is because obviously you would say, no, you have to give authority to the right people. Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addul amanat ila ahliha. Now, if you don't give authority to the right people, what's going to happen is you are not going to get the desired result, or the desired outcome will not be achieved. The same thing with progress. When we talk about progress in this country, we always say we have a roadmap for progress. But this roadmap, if it is not based on concrete, concrete arguments, if it is not based on truth, if it is not based on justice, if it is not derived from virtue, you are not going to get the progress you desire. You might get it, but if that happens, it's only by accident, not by design. So in light of today's education system, I would have to say that we need to have a systemic shift. We need to change the system itself if we are going to really abide by the ideas of progress and development. We cannot be sitting back on our thumbs like we are now and think to ourselves that, well, we have a country that practices parliamentary democracy, and therefore the majority is always the one that wins and rules and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think that is correct. I mean, in terms of an Islamic government, that is not right. For an Islamic government, the ones who know and know they know should be given the right to vote. Now, this doesn't mean that we are being elitist. It means that we need to have more of an intelligent society, which is able to weigh things, which is able to completely rationally and intellectually weigh problems and seek those candidates who can actually resolve these problems best, not simply the sweet seller that we have today. This is unfortunate. Whether we like to admit it or not, what we have is a demagoguery, not democracy. We only have those who say a lot of nice, sweet things to us and want to give us free money, want to give us more quota simply because of the race we are or because of the color of our skin. And that's not right. That is un-Islamic. And yet, Here we are talking about democracy. If we look at the Greek idea, at least particularly Socrates, Socrates himself was not elitist. He didn't think that this right to choose and vote was only limited to a select group of people who had intellectual capacity. He didn't mean that. What he meant was that the public should be educated. And because of that education, they are then therefore allowed to make a conscious decision. Now, if we are saying that we will agree with this, because that's what Islam asks you to do from the very beginning, isn't it? Asks you to seek knowledge. If you decide you're not going to seek knowledge, that you're rather going to succumb to your desire just because you feel a certain way, that is not legitimate. It has to be a conscious effort. It has to be conscious. And therefore, why we have to emphasize this idea of a proper political milieu is because everything else stems from that. When we are living in a country governed by leaders who don't know what they're doing, obviously your education system is going to suffer. And because your education system suffers, your social structure will also suffer. You will see more people who are suffering from poverty. If you have also, you're giving authority to people who are not responsible enough to have that right, then what's going to happen is those people will then corrupt knowledge, which is exactly what happens now. Can you imagine someone in the past asking a question about rashwa and then giving the reply that because it's not part of the law, it has to be redefined because we don't seem to understand it. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry understands what rashwa is. They already know it's a negative. Why now are some of these leaders asking for this term to be redefined because it doesn't exist in Islamic law, apparently, because it's not stealing, according to them. It's not cheating. It is corruption. It's a corruption of knowledge now. And that's an even bigger corruption because those people who are given the authority to disseminate knowledge really don't know. And therefore, what you are doing is you are corrupting society because you are feeding them with a wrong information. Now, we have to change this. And how to change it? We have to change it through education. Therefore, if we want to have a government that is truly a proper democracy, we need to educate the people. And education can happen only in a structured system, which we don't have now. It's a very ambiguous type of thing. Let me ask, when we learn history now, supposing we were to say we need to know history, why do we need to know history? Well, there's a lot of famous maxims from people all over the world talking about how important history is. You know the past in order to know how you're going to go to the future, etc., etc. You must learn from the mistakes of the past so you won't repeat them. These are all things we're already familiar with. But history asks some of the most important questions. And what are these questions? The questions are why? This is one of the big questions of history. Why? Because it makes you think and it makes you analyze and it makes you research on the whys. Because only if you know the why, then you can learn from the mistake and not repeat it. It's no point knowing just the when and the what. But we don't teach this in school. I mean, when I say school, I mean the universities. History and philosophy are becoming more and more irrelevant now in the universities. And this is a sad thing because these are actually one of the most important subjects, apart from language, apart from logic, apart from art, apart from music, apart from, what did we say just now, politics and all these kind of other subjects. They are very important for us because it involves us, the human being. And therefore, we already have a huge, what do you call it, collection of works from the Muslims in the past about the human condition, about humanity. Why are we not learning about this? We talk about justice that revolves around us. And yet we seem to not know what justice is, even though we have been drilled about the concept over and over again. You ask someone, you know, what is justice? Oh, they'll say, yeah, justice means to put things in its proper place. Forgetting, of course, the second part of it that says justice means to put things in its proper place in accordance with itself and with the system to which it belongs. That system that we are referring to now is a problem. And therefore we have to change that system because that system is not right. If you have a system which is not right, you are not going to arrive at justice, which is what's happening today. Although we know conceptually what it is, our thinking is too abstract. We don't know how to apply it. This is one of the problems, again, that I see also now. STEM subjects are abstract. Humanities subjects are also abstract. But if we continually think in abstract or in abstraction, what is the connection with us? We need to think about this. But everything is connected to us as far as Islam is concerned. Everything is connected to us, connected to Allah, connected to creation. How is it we don't know about ourselves? We don't learn about ourselves. We need to learn about ourselves. This is important because that is part of the human failing, the fact that we don't learn about ourselves, the fact that we don't learn about how we need to be conscious of things that we do, how do we need to be conscious of how we choose things, how we make our choices. I don't see this, unfortunately, in the Malaysian education system, nor in generalities in the Muslim education system at large. If we want to emphasize the law, Islamic law, we emphasize that alone. And we say, well, we're already studying the humanities because we are studying this. But that alone is not enough. There are many other things, not just the law. And these studying of the law without discernment is not going to lead to any kind of civilized discourse. It is not going to lead to any kind of innovation or creativity. On the contrary, it's going to stunt that. What happened to literature? What happened to language? Why are we not doing those things? Why are we not studying more of those things? Why are we not studying history? It's a big problem. Look at nowadays, if we were to say that, looking at the rich Islamic tradition, people point a lot to the scholars of the past, but let's not forget about the artisans. Let's not forget about the literary scholars as well, the literature, even the simple literature, the ones meant for children or for entertainment. We should not forget those. Look at how the Alf Layla wa Layla has persevered for almost more than 1,000 years to our time. These are the stories that narrate a period of what they call the golden age of the Muslim civilization. We still talk about those, but those are more or less like just for entertainment. They're not seen as stories with a moral principle, stories with ethical principles. We don't learn ethics from that. We don't learn morality from that. Why? We should. What about the stories for the younger children, the ones from Sa'di, the ones from Clayla wa Dimna? Why do we not study these things and teach our children these things? What about from the Malay heritage itself? The Malay heritage has a lot of it, a lot of these stories. And these stories are precisely to try to train your mind or your intellect to have a logic of consequence. And therefore it's teaching you, training you. But if you don't teach that, what you're going to end up with is someone who has no discernment. And the one who has no discernment, therefore, how can you ask that fellow to be responsible to hold a voting right so that you will have to bear the consequence of whoever candidate he picks? That's not right. So now we can see that the humanities are very important in this STEM-driven world, particularly when it comes to politics, particularly when it comes to literature, when it comes to art, when it comes to language. These are all very important things. We learn a lot from that. The Islamic civilization was built on those things. We don't do that anymore. When we like to talk about Islamic civilization, we talk about the sciences. And what we particularly mean is the physical sciences, the phenomenological. But Is the phenomenological wholly responsible for the expansion and the greatness of the Muslim civilization? No, of course not. Perhaps what had more of an emphasis on the Muslim civilization was the humanities, the art of the Muslims, the language of the Muslims, the culture of the Muslims, the traditions of the Muslims, the literature of the Muslims. These are the kind of the kalam of the Muslims. These are more important, I think. And these are the ones that really led to the expansion of the Muslim civilization and led to the greatness of the Muslim civilization. That's what we can say. I think we can stop here and just field some questions if there has been any interest so far. Dr. Khalif?
You still have about 20 minutes before we open our question and answers. But do you prefer to, maybe you can conclude speech just now?
Say that again?
Maybe you can conclude the main points that you want to deliver before we open for discussion.
Main points.
Yeah.
Well, the main points just now was, obviously, we started talking about what the humanities are. We don't want to, I mean, the reason I say the humanities in English is because, number one, we're conducting ourselves in English. Number two, if we start bringing in other terms, it might confuse. But we have said just now that the humanities, what we mean by this is the subjects of the humanities are things like philosophy, what do you call it? Things like philosophy. These are all the disciplines related to the aspects of that, to human society rather, culture, history, language, literature, geography, art, law, ethics, justice, politics, religion, archaeology. All these things are things associated with the humanities. And because we ourselves are human beings, we need to be concerned with this, because these things are all things that relate to us, isn't it? And then, of course, we said what the STEM subjects were, and it's true. I mean, these STEM subjects are actually driven by economic progress. These subjects are, well, I would say that the STEM subjects are ones that lack imagination. Then, of course, the STEM subjects, we have the shortcomings of both the humanities and the STEM subjects today. And the shortcomings were that we don't have the proper curriculum and that we don't have the proper teachers, proper teaching staff for this. And one of the things that perhaps might be a bit of a problem with the STEM subjects is that those without a certain aptitude for STEM will most probably be left behind. What was that just now? We emphasized also the fact that one of the humanities on politics is this idea of democracy, because a lot of Muslim countries nowadays call themselves a democracy. And we want to see whether really it is a democracy or not in the Greek sense. And let's just, I have to say one thing as well. We have to remember that when the Greeks were talking about these kind of things, democracy and things like this was a philosophical exercise. We have to emphasize this. It's a philosophical exercise when it comes to the Greeks. They were not something that they thought they could put into practice. That's why it was called part of philosophy. But it was more or less like a philosophic virtue. That's what the Greeks were doing when they were talking about democracy. Unlike the Muslims. Now, for the Muslims, we talk about this as relative to religion, to Islam itself, not simply a philosophic virtue. This is relative to Islam when we talk about these things. When we talk about this kind of an idea vis-a-vis Islam, we have to say that the soul has already been taught right and wrong before the soul was united with the body and was sent to this earth, before the soul existed on earth, in other words. It was already taught what was good for it and what was bad for it. So we can say that inherently, as far as the Muslim is concerned, we will say that we already were taught what is good for us and what is bad for us before we even existed in this world, in the physical sense. So these are ideas that we want to portray now, and we say that we want to emphasize STEM, but these STEM subjects do not relate at all to religion. Whereas for us, when we talk about the humanities, because the humanities, one of the subjects of those humanities is also religion, isn't it? And therefore it is very much relative to the Muslims. In addition to that, if we are talking about democracy nowadays, especially when we talk about a Muslim country where there is a democracy, we don't mean that Greek philosophic virtue of democracy. We mean the Muslim idea of democracy, which is something that is necessary, actually. In other words, you, the individual, has to be properly educated in order to make the correct choice when choosing who is going to be the one who leads and who is going to be the one who determines what kind of a map we are going to be on, the one who determines what kind of curriculum we are going to learn, the one who determines how we should live our lives. These are all already given to us by our religion. So therefore we can't now claim ignorance. But these kind of ideas, I mean, like we said, if we just simply say that we are going to adopt Greek ideas without understanding that these kind of things are philosophical virtues, then we are in trouble. And look at what the Western countries have done. Look at what America has done. They have adopted democracy and became the champion of democracy. They want to go and influence the Muslims about their version of democracy. But we can see even today how flawed that system is, because everyone there is given the right to vote because it became a birthright. They don't talk at all about how to be educated in terms of democracy, how to be properly educated. They don't talk about that at all. In fact, they don't even think that is an issue. Whereas we are saying that if you want to be able to vote, to be given that responsibility, you first of all have to be conscious of what responsibility you are accepting. And then you have to be responsible enough to school yourself on the issues first before you can make a conscious decision. You have to be conscious also of what you're deciding, not simply based on who you like and who you don't like, or which candidate is going to give you more goodies than the other one. That's why I like the story of Socrates, and I like the story that Socrates portrayed when it came to the candy merchant and the doctor, and this idea of demagoguery, because I think they were right, actually. And the Muslims in the past also have correctly interpreted what Socrates meant when it came to this kind of idea. Look at what the Persian government is doing, what they call themselves Vilayatul, what is it? Vilayat Faqih. Some people can argue that that kind of thing is a what do you call it? Elitist type of thing, this Vilayat Faqih. Only a few people decide. But that's not what we mean. I mean, what we are talking about now is that you have to have a properly educated society, an intelligent society, not just a few people, an intelligent society on the whole. Even though we have differing aptitudes, even though we have differing talents, we have differing intellectual capacity, you still have to give that opportunity for them to be educated so that they can therefore make a proper and informed decision. Otherwise, we are going to stay in the same confusing pot that we are now. So I think that if we are going to emphasize STEM subjects in education today, we also need to balance that out with an emphasis on the humanities as well, especially when it comes to the Muslims, and especially when it comes to us. When we talk about the worldview of Islam, we need to have an emphasis on the humanities as well as the sciences. The same kind of thing. In fact, if we want to put more emphasis on the humanities, is actually better, because that's the kind of thing that is more inclusive. I mean, Islam is the only religion that talks about everything, you know? And it's the only religion, more or less, it's the only religion that actually talks about man and who he is more than any other. This is why today, when I hear some people talking about Islam as being a way of life, I disagree with that. I will not say that Islam is a way of life. That assumes, therefore, that there are other ways as well. But I don't see that. On the contrary, I see Islam as being the meaning of life. We need to understand this. We need to understand who we are in relation to the bigger picture. And who we are is very much dependent upon what we know. And if we know nothing, we will not know ourselves. isn't it? And if you don't know yourself, how are you supposed to know your God and your religion, isn't it? Dr. Khalif.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to emphasize the fact that you mentioned just now about the importance of humanities and the primacy of humanities over the science, which contributed to the greatness of Islamic civilization in the past. So that's very important, I think, apart from other points that you shared just now, because nowadays the confusion is that the emphasis more on the science subject. And this is very much felt in our societies. Whenever we have intelligent students, they always be directed towards mastering science rather than humanities. And this is also very much relevant to the idea of hierarchy of knowledge, that knowledge is not all the same. All the sciences are not the same level of importance. Some sciences, in particular Fardu Ain, is more important or should be the core, the main science knowledge that direct and govern all other sciences. So with that, I would like to open for question and answers.
Well, I have one question here.
Yeah.
There was a question here. I don't know what happened to it. Hold on, let me just go back to that. Where is it here?
This is from Shahmi.
No, this from Ikhwan.
Yeah, Ikhwan. Yes.
Ikhwan Azlan. It's commonly accepted that the Western sciences were the main reason they could raise to world dominance, subduing even the civilization of Islam with all its humanities. Because of this, in order to raise the challenge of the age, Muslims have to embrace STEM too. Who said it's a commonly accepted fact that the Western sciences were the main reason they could raise to world dominance? I mean, that's an assumption that you think. I don't think that's what it was. On the contrary, I think the reason that allowed the Western civilization to expand was precisely the Muslim humanities. This is why in the West they call themselves, or they refer to that period or the age in Western civilization as the Renaissance. Now that's also a misleading term, isn't it? Renaissance. Because Renaissance means that you had something before and now you are getting it back. You had something before, then you lost it, then now you're reclaiming it again. But they didn't have anything before this, before the Renaissance. They had nothing. So what are they reclaiming? They're not reclaiming anything. They're actually taking and borrowing heavily from what the Muslim civilization did. I mean, just look at the story that I used to tell before about when we were referring to, what do you call it? To the dismal state of the Muslims as we are going back to the 11th century Europe. And remember, 11th century Europe was still mired in the dark ages at that time, while the Muslims were vibrant. They had all kinds of things. I mean, Al-Andalusia was a 350,000 inhabitant city. It was a fantastic place. So, I mean, to say that the sciences is what drove the West, it's not really the sciences. It's more the humanities, the arts. The Renaissance was more towards the arts and the humanities. This is what led to the explosion of Western culture and civilization, I think. But they say that it's dominance, subduing even the civilization of Islam. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they did subdue. But the subjugation of the Muslims was not because of the West primarily. It was also because of the Muslims themselves. They became more and more ignorant. Greed overtook them. Their what do you call it? Their passion to fuel their bestial nature was perhaps greater than their passion to subdue the bestial nature. Should we embrace STEM? Yes, of course. I mean, I'm not saying we should just ignore it. I didn't say that at all. I said, if you're going to emphasize STEM subjects, you also have to emphasize the humanities equally as well. If not, perhaps more than the STEM subjects. We are not saying ignore them. Of course not. It's important. These kind of things are important, but let's not think that the entire importance is only on STEM subjects. That's not the case. And as you said just now, Dr. Khalif, the intelligentsia are the ones who are encouraged to do STEM rather than the humanities. Why is that? It's because of the economic opportunity. The only thing that the government wants is economic opportunity or economic advancement. That's all. Government only thinks like that. One track, economy, economy, economy. The bottom line. That's what it is. Let me see what else is there. Can you help with this? I don't know.
I think there's a question.
The second one from Brother Shahmi. I am Shahmi, a university student. In recent years, we have all been reached with voting responsibly, which is the idea that every single person is obligated to vote. But if one is aware that he is not informed enough to vote for the best candidate, does he still need to vote? Even if his vote might result in the wrong candidate gaining power and burdening others due to his choice.
Let me answer this by saying this. If you don't have the responsibility, do you think you should have the right? Obviously not, isn't it? The responsibility precedes the right. That's number one. Number two, you are now saying that if you don't have enough information to vote, but then you still vote anyway, even if you know the vote might result in the wrong candidate gaining power and burdening the people. But then that's what we call injustice, isn't it? Isn't it? So now if you accept that responsibility to vote simply because you still have the right, or it's what do you call it? Obligation for you to vote. That's not correct. If you are accepting a responsibility, you have to do it consciously. And that consciousness means that you have to be just to yourself. If you are not responsible enough, then to be just to yourself, you should say, no, I'm not going to. And that will also bring justice to the wider population, because your injustice will not carry on to them. So I mean, if you don't know, if you are not consciously accepting a responsibility, then I think you should do the right thing and do what is just. What else is there here?
Yeah, the next question from Darwina. Can the arts and literature at present time be shaped as medium of applied philosophy or ethics aiming for a public audience?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Say that again, please.
Can the arts and literature at present time be shaped as a medium of applied philosophy or ethics aiming for a public audience?
Can the arts or literature? Where is this question?
Arts and literature. Regarded as
medium
applied
or philosophy or ethics aiming for a public audience. I really don't understand what kind of question this is. Can the arts and literature at the present time be shaped as a medium of applied philosophy or ethics aiming at a public audience?
Maybe you can voice out.
Of course, art and literature can always be applied for that. I mean, look at this, like I said, look at this Alf Layla wa Layla. Every single story in Alf Layla wa Layla has an ethical and moral principle to it. It is not simply for entertainment purposes. There is an ethical and moral principle involved. And that's teaching you ethics. It's teaching you morality. It's teaching you etiquette as well. These are from stories. The same goes for Saadi. All of Saadi's stories have some kind of commonality in the sense that they have an ethical and morality to it. This is what the Muslim literature and the arts did in the past. When they were telling stories, it's not just for entertainment purposes. That's why I used to say before that the primary way towards education is storytelling. You have to be able to tell stories, and proper stories, interesting enough that the people will be captivated on the one hand, but then scholarly enough that it'll also impart some kind of an ethical and moral principle as well. So yes, obviously the arts and literature can be used as a medium to teach these kind of things. What else is there?
The next question, Sister Sarah Albani, yeah, you can voice out. introduce yourself. Yeah.
She will speak.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank
Walaikum
you very
salam.
much for a very enlightening talk, Dr. Syed Ali. My name is Sada Albani. I am a Syrian American postgraduate student at RZS Cassis. When you were speaking, a quote came to mind from the Muslim Public Affairs Council in America, and they have a very famous slogan that says, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." So as to emphasize the need for Muslims to be involved in mainstream politics, particularly in America. And so many Muslims have heeded this call as an attempt to advocate for the needs and the rights of the minority. And through doing so, of course, there's a degree to which one must play by the rules of the majority. And so I'd like to ask for your thoughts on this and how Muslims can be involved in the political system in an effort to achieve their needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, I believe, I agree with that. I mean, I agree that you have to have participation in the political system. But we are not America, in Malaysia here. I understand what America is doing, and these rights and responsibilities and participation is for the minorities, as you said just now, yes? But as far as the Muslims are concerned, when we speak about involvement of responsibility and it is more for justice sake, not for the sake of a minority or majority. It's for the sake of justice. And that's what we have to emphasize, not simply a majority or a minority. We have to emphasize what is just. And as far as how do the Muslims be involved, that's what I was saying earlier. It needs to be part of the education curriculum. In other words, in order for you to make these choices, one needs to be properly skilled in how to make the choice, isn't it? And therefore, we need to have the knowledge of logic of consequence, which is something that we don't study. We don't learn this. I mean, even when we talk of studying the humanities in an American university, which I also went to, when we studied the humanities, one of the elective subjects was the logic. Now, of course, it's modern formal logic. It's very mathematical. But if you look at the Muslim tradition, the formal logic studied by the Muslims is not the modern formal logic counterpart. It is not mathematical in that sense. It is all through language, through premise. And this is something that the Muslim logicians and Muslim scholars throughout the ages have used, this logic of consequence. They have been very liberal with that usage. And unfortunately, we don't study this in school, in colleges. I don't mean in the primary school. Primary school, there's a different methodology for doing this. How to study the logic of consequence for the young students, like the ones in primary school, in secondary school. We use literature. We use poetry, these kind of things, or music even. Music and simple mathematics. If you look at the Muslim works of scholarly repute, like the books on philosophy and stuff like that, there is no book written by the Muslims on philosophy that does not begin with logic or music or mathematics. They always begin with one of these three things, either logic, mathematics, or music, always. And then that is followed by physics, and that is also again followed by metaphysics, and that is Muslim philosophy, right? Well, why do they start with logic? Because they want to make sure that you know how to think correctly in order to understand what is being discussed later on in physics and metaphysics, especially metaphysics. Whereas physics is more empirical, metaphysics is not. Metaphysics is more intellectual. And therefore, in order for you to grasp the correct ideologies or the correct meanings to certain things, you need to be skilled in your understanding of logic. Now, that in itself is a science. But when it comes to the use of this logic of consequence, how you use it, that is an art, a skill that you can only learn. Now, if you don't teach that, if you don't teach this logic of consequence, you are not going to have an intelligent society. This is why the Malays, especially in Malaysia in the past, when their children used to go, before their children were in primary school even, the parents used to give them like songs. They used to sing songs to them, or they would give them some kind of poetry or something like that, that was entertaining on the one hand, But on the other hand, it was also to teach these children what to do and what not to do. Now, remember we said before that as far as the Muslim understanding is concerned, the soul already knows what is good for it and what is bad for it before it comes into existence in this world. Of course, now that it became insan, there is that degree of forgetfulness that we have to again relearn. And how do we relearn this? We begin by putting things in their proper places in our intellect. That's what we have to do first. Now, why is it not taught in the universities? Why is logic considered to be irrelevant? Why is philosophy irrelevant? Why is, history irrelevant? These are the kind of tools that we actually need, because all of these subjects, philosophy, religion, what was I saying just now? Literature, language, all of them have to have this logic of consequence knowledge, which we don't have, which we have no skill in. I mean, look, if you tell a child, don't touch that, or don't play with fire, why? Because you'll get burned. That's the logic of consequence, but in a very simple form. You're telling the child, if you touch the fire, you'll get burned. If you put your finger in the electrical socket, you'll get a shock. This is a logic of consequence. If then, if then, if then. But your mind is doing that all the time without you realizing it. This logic of consequence. If then, if then, if then. All the time without you realizing. But when you are conscious of it, that's when you can make what they call an educated decision. So when it comes to participation, especially in the political realm, first of all, you have to be educated on how to think in a correct manner, so that you can make a just decision. But if you don't do that, what are you going to have? You're going to produce a herd of buffalo. That's what they call herd mentality, isn't it? Just follow the leader. That's what we're going to produce, and which is what we have produced, unfortunately. Look at America. 50% we can say are stupid. The other 50% are intelligent, but that depends on who you talk to. Some will say that the Republican candidate was great. The other one will say the Democratic candidate was great, was good. But then you have to make this estimation, isn't it? You have to use your imagination as well, and estimation powers, the faculties, to try to decide which one would be better. And in the end, the better one apparently wins. But that's not the case, because it's society in general, in the case of America, that picks, because everyone has a right to vote. It's not everyone has a responsibility, it's everyone has a right, because in Western ideology, the emphasis is more on the right rather than the responsibility. Whereas for the Muslim, it's the other way around. The emphasis is on the responsibility before the right comes, before you can even speak of a right. I remember there was someone who was from Australia vehemently arguing with me that it was no, the right comes first. Then only it has to be responsibility. So I gave this very simple example to her. I said to her, let's just imagine that you want to drive on the public road. You have some money, so you go to the car dealership, you throw down your $20,000 and you say, here, I'm going to buy this car. Now, the person at the car dealership, what is the first thing they ask you? Do you have a driver's license? Do you have insurance? Why? Because without a driver's license, without insurance, you are not going to be able to operate that vehicle on a public road. Why? Because you don't have responsibility yet. The responsibility comes for you by you getting a license and then getting insurance. By getting this, then you'll have the right to drive on the road. And therefore, the responsibility is prior to the right. Although she understood that example, she still refused to admit that your responsibility is prior to a right. But maybe we are going off topic here. What you were asking about the how do the Muslims participate is through that, through education, proper education. But as I said earlier at the onset, I think our problem in Malaysia and in the Muslim world in general is that we have a very vague curriculum. We don't have instruction from the people who know and know they know on developing the curriculum, what subject matter. And in addition to that, the people who are supposed to teach these subjects are also a little bit in a dearth. We don't have many people who can do this, unfortunately.
The next question. regarding how to study philosophy. I would like to reveal our plan, Brother Shawal and all the audience. We have a plan to conduct a short course on Islamic philosophy, and will be delivered by Datuk Syed Ali in the near future.
Oh, are we?
If we going to conduct this, who are interested to attend, raise your hand.
No. I think it's because we were just saying about the Islamic philosophy in the beginning just now. The idea that
particularly the idea of the right way of thinking, that's very important from Islamic perspective. Yes.
Yeah, that's what needs to be emphasized. I mean, that's what we were doing. That's what I said just now, that Muslim philosophy always begins with either logic, mathematics, music. I mean, because these things are always, I mean, mathematics, music, and logic, they're all very precise sciences in themselves. And because of that, because they're very precise, there isn't much room for error or ambiguity. That's the reason why they begin with that. And beginning with that means that it already sets the stage for how you are going to be understanding the consequent subjects, namely physics and metaphysics. And we are not saying that we should not study science at all. Of course not. I mean, that's what philosophy was actually to the Muslims, as far as that is concerned. I mean, they did do the sciences. I mean, it was part of physics and metaphysics and mathematics, obviously. So, I mean, these things were also a requirement, you know?
Yeah, the thing is, it's not the question that you should think first. It's not how to study, but whom you should study from. The person, the correct person that you study.
Yeah, that's important.
Philosophy in general, because if you study from the wrong, if you learn it from the wrong person, then it's not going to be beneficial for you. Okay.
Dr. Khalif, can I said something? First of all, I would like to say thank you very much to Syed Ali for very interesting, important talk. And also as a historian, I would like to say thank you to emphasize the importance of history in our talk. And actually, history is not only answering the question why, but also the question how, and that is why philosophy as well as history is gonna be abundant right now, because when you just teaching STEAM this subject, you educate the servant who can precisely solve precise technical problem, even in the area of high-level technology. But if you teach people from the very beginning, or of course on the university level, logic, philosophy, history, you produce the person who can make decision, and how you will lead people who know how to do decision. That is why our politicians sometimes don't want to develop this humanistic education, because they not need people who have ability to do decision. They just need people who can do work for them. That is the difference between ideal leader and, let's say, hang tuah, ideal servant, isn't it? That is why we need to know, the history will help us to ask the proper question. Why these precisely subjects are not developed in this system of education? Precisely because of this, and history is a huge lab to show us what's happened, if it will be like this, and like this. That is why for us better, not for us, but for them, they think for us is better not to know it, because it's for easy to them to explain a lot of things. I just want to encourage everybody to ask proper questions And this, you cannot ask proper question without knowing philosophy and history. Thank you to give me chance to voice it, Datuk.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tatiana. That's a good point to make there by Tatiana just now. I think we need to think about that and also add to this that, I mean, the fact that these politicians today call themselves politicians, in reality, in the strict sense of the word, they are not politicians because they don't understand politics. Because as we said just now, politics is something that you have to have a skill, not simply that you have to have a sharp or a sweet tongue and a sharp, what do you call it? Yeah, good, a very
Rhetoric.
Charm.
like on?
Rhetorics.
No. I mean, if you are very charismatic, you don't just need charisma and skill at how to talk and things like this, how to convince people. That's not what you should be doing. That's not really what politics is about. It's supposed to be making the right decisions in order for you to arrive at justice, which will then, as far as the Muslim is concerned, which will then give your life meaning. And that's why I said just now that for me, Islam cannot be said to be a way of life. As far as I'm concerned, it is the meaning of life. But like I said, thank you very much, Tatiana, for your input.
We have other questions here from Latin Sapora.
Wait, there was one question before that, Khalif, sorry to interrupt you. There was one question before that from Sarah Sirbaji. It says, if we were trying to convince someone that the humanities led to the development of the Western civilization, how would we explain the mechanisms behind that? Well, you don't have to explain the mechanisms. I mean, just look at what they have done. Look at the arts and the music of the West. It started there. The Renaissance began with all this. They started borrowing from the Muslims as early as the 11th century. They started borrowing. And then from there, it developed in the West as far as their literature is concerned. But let's just remember also that if I said just now that the Muslims now are back to 11th century Europe in terms of the dearth of knowledge, this is what we mean, because look at how they were. They started borrowing elements from the Muslim civilization. And what are these elements they started borrowing? They started borrowing the sciences, they started borrowing the language, they started borrowing the philosophies, they started borrowing art. All these things they started borrowing from the Muslim world. And then they took it and they put it in their own context. And that's what led to the Renaissance, to the explosion of the Renaissance. But it's beginning with their art. And it begins with their art because they were trying to explain their religion. And the art itself portrayed their religious understanding. We can see this even today. Look at the artworks that are preserved today. Look at the music that is still preserved today from the Western world. These are all refined, very sophisticated, wonderful things that still exist today. And yet, what have we done with our heritage, the Muslim world? What have we done with it? What have we done as far as Malaysia is concerned? We can ask. What about we can say, what happened to the Malay music? What happened to that? We don't even know what Malay music is now. You say, well, Malay music, the Malays are the one that invented the ghazal. What happened to that? Now it became like a side thing, only during parties maybe, or during some kind of a get together. You'll have someone come and play. And that one is also very difficult to find because there's only a very few people who practice this. What happened to all the great literature of the Malays, the Sufi literature of the Malays? What happened to that? We don't study that at all. We don't teach it in universities, unfortunately. And this is a sad thing for us. On the one hand, we are saying that we have a great culture and civilization. But on the other hand, we don't even know what that culture and civilization is. So how can we even claim to have such a thing when we don't know what it is? So in answer to that question just now, yeah, of course, you just tell them to look at it. You don't have to give them any kind of methodology. Just look at what they've done. number of students joining STEM is dramatically declining. It's a great concern to Academic Science Malaysia, National STEM Malaysia. Thus, I'm quite worried that the nation will lose both one, STEM students with humanistic values. Okay, this is from, who's this from?
Professor Satu.
Latin Sapura.
Yeah, Professor Sapura. She says, where is it? Yes, so thank you very much. The number of students joining STEM is dramatically declining, which is of great concern to Academy Science Malaysia, National STEM Malaysia. I'm quite worried that the nation will lose both one, STEM students and STEM students with humanistic values. Well, I'm sure that she is more well-versed in terms of the number of students who are opting out of STEM subjects than I would ever be. So I'm not going to argue as far as that's concerned. But yes, it is an alarming trend why these students are declining or getting away from STEM. But again, we have to address the root cause of this. Why is because, again, like I said, the curriculum is ambiguous. That's number one. Number two, the staff are not qualified, or the teaching, the teachers themselves don't know what to be teaching and how to be teaching. And then again, of course, it could be a third possibility that the students themselves don't seem to have the aptitude. But that's not a negative, simply because you don't have the aptitude towards STEM, but you have more of an aptitude towards humanities. That's not a negative. And I mean, if the number of STEM students is declining, it's because of the way that we are not teaching it properly. That's number one. Like I said, the curriculum is ambiguous and the teaching staff doesn't know what to teach, or they're not qualified. So how do we overcome this? We look at these three problems and we overcome it by rectifying them. We make a proper curriculum, not one with ambiguity. We also bring in qualified teachers who understand how to teach and when to teach and what to teach. That's what we do. And again, we have to address the issue of why are we getting these teachers to teach in the first place if they're not qualified? Well, it's because the qualified ones are not going to stay in a country which doesn't appreciate them and doesn't enumerate them with the correct and just salary in order for them to stay. So therefore they go to overseas countries, they go to the West, where they profit better, and the West profits from their teaching. We don't. We would rather pay bank managers enormous salaries. We would rather pay politicians enormous salaries. We would rather pay the CEOs of companies massive salaries, and yet the teachers, the ones who are the linchpin of all these things, are being ignored. Look at us today. Look at us now. All of us today, we would always say that we would do better if we had a better salary. Am I not right? Is it correct? If we had better salary, we would be doing much better. And yet we are not. We are being ignored. We are being ignored, and we are being ridiculed simply because we know something that they consider to be irrelevant, like philosophy and history. And remember, a few years ago, and by a few years, I mean at least 10 years ago, the Malaysian government proudly announced that philosophy and history have become irrelevant subjects, and therefore we are going to concentrate more on STEM subjects. Okay, that's what the Malaysian government has officially said before. This was before in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago. They said history and philosophy irrelevant. Well, let's look at what America has done. America also decided that they were going to reduce the humanities in Ivy League schools, no less, and emphasize more on STEM subjects. I don't know if Miss Sarah Albani can attest to this or not, but they decided that they were going to limit now the humanities. So a lot of these students who are wanting to study at Ivy League universities in the humanities are now opting, rather than stay in the American university and learn a subject which they did not choose or which they don't enjoy, they would rather go overseas to Europe or to other places, Asia, to study the humanities, particularly history, philosophy, culture, language, these kind of subjects. And yet, Malaysia is deciding that we want to close these faculties. Now, isn't this an opportunity for some government to say, if the students from another country are leaving in droves, are making an exodus for other countries to study, it's an opportunity now for us to include these curriculums in our universities so that they can learn about our culture, our civilization, our history. And then this will be known better. Instead, it's like nothing to us. And these are students from Ivy League universities. These are people who are intelligent, who can contribute. Why don't we invite them and entice them to come to Malaysia, like Sarah Albani is coming to Malaysia now, to Cassis? Why don't we entice them to come here to study our culture, our language, our civilization, the Malay archipelago? In other words, Malaysia, Indonesia, all the Malay archipelago, basically. It's a huge, rich history. How come we are not developing some kind of curriculum for that, so that we can entice them to come, and also for the Malaysian student themselves to learn about their own culture and civilization, rather than the nonsense they teach in universities today? I mean, look, for instance, if you want to now develop a curriculum for politics, for democracy in universities today, if I were to say this to a group of government people or politicians, they will say, yes, great idea. I mean, they might not, obviously, but they might say it's a great idea. Let's do this. And then they'll put their own opinion of who they should study in terms of politics. And what do they bring? They bring in, okay, the past prime ministers. Will bring in Tun Hussein On, will bring in Dr. Mahathir, will bring in, what's his name? Abdullah Badawi, will bring in all these ex-prime ministers and study their political ideology and how they were successful and how they developed Malaysia. But in my opinion, all of them are demagogues. This is not true politics or true democracy. So why study them? It's a waste of time, because they are not making intelligent decisions. They are not making decisions which are just. What's the point of studying that? You should be studying those political systems or those governments which were just, which have a clear understanding of what responsibility is. That's what we need to be doing, rather than think about how great the fellow is in terms of his public speaking ability. I mean, we all know this, don't we? Being Malaysian, we know how it is. Public speaking is a fantastic thing. Anybody who is a public speaker, they're all, oh, this fellow's fantastic. As if the ability of the tongue is the same as the ability of the intellect, or equals the ability of the intellect. It's not correct. Sorry, Dr. Khalif.
Yes. Yes, we have other questions. Yeah. And we still have about 2-3 minutes. Do you want to entertain this question?
Say that again?
We have 2-3 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, there's one here that was just highlighted to me from Danny Rahim, currently a college student, building off Plato's Republic and his class of citizens. Would you associate the STEM field to the exclusive production class due to the field's relationship with economic growth? If so, would we then consider proponents of the humanities as, or the closest to, the guardian class who should lead the way in governing the state? Thank you. Oh boy, how do we answer this? I'm not comfortable with using Greek kind of, what do you call it? The worldview of that Greek kind of thing with the class kind of, I'm not comfortable with that. But I mean, we can say very, very offhandedly that, yeah, I mean, this STEM is like building an exclusive class of production class, like you say. Yes, I mean, more or less you can say that if we understand it only to mean that we are concerned with the economic sector, which it is, unfortunately. Now, what about the other one? You said, would we then consider humanities a guardian class? I mean, I suppose you could say that as well. But like I said, we're not comfortable with using all these kind of Greek or Western classifications. Why don't you just think in the worldview of Islam, in the sense that those who know and know they know are the ones who should be given the authority, not the ones who know not and know not they know not, which is what's happening today. They should not be given any authority. Dr. Khalif?
Yes, very good point. So, very precise answer from Dr. Syed Ali just now. Very important for us to understand these matters. We should not think in a way that is alien to the worldview of Islam. So we must learn the worldview of Islam so that we can think correctly. So we hope in the future we will have more series like this. Inshallah, Datuk, this is not the first appearance here. He was with us last few years in the past. So thank you very much. We have come to the end of this program. It's 4 o'clock already. So inshallah, we will have other program in the near future. Thank you, Datuk, for your time with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalif, and also thank you to Cassis, and thank you to all the participants and students who have taken time out of their day just to listen to this. I'm really sad that we couldn't do this in person, because I think it would be much more convivial. I think it'd be in person. It would be much better. But of course, we can't do anything about that. But maybe, inshallah, in the future, we can have a face-to-face, so to speak.
Yeah. It is always better with face-to-face, but with this media,
face-to-face is always better.
Yeah.
And I mean, if there were things that perhaps upset some people, then I mean, what can I do?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. So we enjoy the discussion just now. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Who is this?
Waalaikumsalam.